So we're just checking the audio on the other channels, and then we'll get started with the content that we wanted to share. Okay, so it looks like the audio is working on one of the two channels, and let me check the other one. All right, great. I see that we're also on the other channel. So let's just verify. Yep. So the audio is working great. So it's a great topic we wanted to share today. Specifically, we're going to talk about the top issues to discuss with your CPA and or attorney if you're looking to use your retirement money to fund the purchase or startup of a business via a ROBS 401k, also known as a rollover as business startup. So let's jump into the agenda, and then we'll turn to the content. So again, if you're on the other platforms like LinkedIn or YouTube, thank you so much for joining. You can join this Zoom link directly at mysolo401k.net/mycommunity. It's free to join. All are welcome. Joining gets you access to our daily live Zoom link. We go live every day at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. For example, tomorrow we'll be back to discuss how to save up to $61,000 per year in a Roth IRA to invest in cryptocurrency. So a crypto Roth IRA. On Friday, we'll be back at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern to go through our standard daily live session where we go through frequently asked questions regarding solo 401ks and self-directed IRA LLCs. Joining also gets you access to our forums where you can post questions 24/7. So they're both great ways to learn and to share the knowledge. So let's start out with the disclosure. The presentation is being provided for educational purposes only and should not be construed as tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as a solicitation. When making an investment decision, please consult with your tax attorney and financial professional. So we want to go through today issues to discuss with your CPA or attorney if you're looking to fund your business via a rollover as business startup or what's also called a ROBS 401k. So we'll first lay the foundation with the basics of what a rollover as business startup is, and then we'll turn to those top issues and considerations. So again, you can join the Zoom link directly at mysolo401k.net/mycommunity. That'll get you access to our daily live Zoom links. We go live every day at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, so you can ask questions in the Zoom. You can also post questions 24/7 in our forums. So now let's turn to those basics. A rollover as business startup, also referred to as a ROBS transaction, allows you to use retirement money to start or buy a business without having to pay taxes or penalties. So let's say you have $200,000 in a former employer plan and you want to buy a business. Let's say it's a services business. So you could use all of that money, like the whole $200,000 via a ROBS transaction without having to pay taxes or penalties. So in order to be able to access that money without having to pay taxes or penalties, you have to follow certain key requirements. Number one, you have to use eligible retirement money because the process is going to require rolling the money over to a new 401k plan. So that means the money has to be eligible to be rolled over. So we're talking about funds that are in a former employer plan or a non-Roth IRA. You're not eligible to roll over funds from a Roth IRA to any type of 401k, including the ROBS 401k. Next, you need to use the money to start or buy an active business. So this is not for passive investing. It's for investing in an active business. So the technical term is an operating company. Typically, you're able to satisfy that active business requirement because the underlying business activity is providing goods or services, right? This could be a restaurant or maybe a clothes business, right? Or maybe an auto repair business, right? I mean, there's that terminology, that requirement, it covers a lot of different businesses, right? It's a big umbrella, but it does need to be that active business. The business needs to be operated as a corporation it's taxed as a C corporation. So it can't be taxed as an LLC. It can't be taxed as a sole proprietorship. You're going to have to operate the business as a C corporation. You also need to be a bona fide employee, because the foundation of how you're doing this is you're rolling your money over from your existing retirement account to a new 401k. In order for you to be able to participate in that 401k, you need to be an employee in the business that's sponsoring that 401k. So that's why you have to be a bona fide employee. Typically, that's met by working at least 1,000 hours per year. As far as the steps in the ROBS process, number one, it's setting up a C corporation, so incorporating a business. Next, once that corporation has been established, the C corporation will sponsor a 401k plan, and a separate account is set up for that 401k plan. So for example, that account might be at Fidelity or Schwab. We're talking about a free brokerage account. The funds are rolled over into that 401k account. So if you have an IRA at Schwab, it would be an internal transfer from that IRA at Schwab to the new brokerage account for the ROBS 401k. Or if the money's in a former employer plan, the funds will be transferred by check. Or if it's an IRA somewhere else, the funds will be transferred by check, transfer check, mailed to you, then you deposited it into the new 401k account. Once the funds clear into the 401k account, you'll be able to wire the money from that 401k brokerage account into the business bank account of the C corporation. So under step one, once the corporation has been established, we will be able to obtain an EIN number for the corporation, so you can go and open up a business bank account for that C corporation at the bank of your choice. This is the account where the money is ultimately going to be invested in from the 401k. It's also the account that you could use going forward as your operating account, right? If you are accepting credit card payments from your customers, you might link your merchant account to that account, et cetera. Once the money hits that business bank account, step 5, the C corporation can use the funds for any type of legitimate business purpose, including buying or starting a business. So now that we've laid the foundation, again, thank you so much. If you're on the other platforms like LinkedIn or YouTube, you can join directly at mysolo401k.net/my community. It's free to join our community. That gets you access to our daily live webinar. We go live every day. You get access to the Zoom link, so you can ask questions. You can post questions in our forums 24/7. So again, if you are on the Zoom, please chat over your questions, and we'll go through those questions at the end. So the first issue when you're discussing this with your CPA or attorney, it's going to be good that they understand the structure, right? The process, the steps, what we just went through, right? Then there's going to be certain items that it's going to make sense to highlight, certain issues, certain requirements, et cetera, for that CPA or attorney. So now we want to go through those lists of top issues to discuss with your CPA or attorney. So number one, it's going to be very important to highlight that the business has to be operated as a C corporation, right? A lot of times there may be temptation for that tax advisor, say, to want to file as an S Corp, because that's what the tax advisor does for the tax advisor's small business clients. So here, though, because of the way that the business was funded, you're going to have to file and report as a C corporation. And that C corporation is not just a shell entity to fund your business. Like if you have another business, let's say it's an S Corp, you're not going to be able to just put the money to the C Corp, then transfer it to the S, and then operate to the S. No, that needs to be the active operating company. Of course, the C corporation can have subsidiaries, right? But it's still underneath that C corporation umbrella. It have to be 100%, say, subsidiary LLCs, where all the income and expenses flows up to that C corporation tax return. So this is going to be a very important requirement. So if you hear your CPA mention, let's file as an S, hopefully you'll at least remember that there was something about that, circle back to us, and then we can explain it directly to your CPA or attorney. So that's certainly an important issue to understand for the CPA and attorney. Another important issue, just going through kind of the process at the beginning, right? When you pay that fee to set up the plan, in other words, our fee, it needs to be paid with personal funds and it can't be reimbursed. So when you're paying our fee, you can't take the money out of the money. You can't pay the fee out of the funds that you're rolling over. You would pay it with non-retirement money. Of course, you can pay with a credit card, but once that C corporation is funded with the retirement money, that C corporation can't turn around and pay you the money back, or it can't pay off a personal credit card that you used to pay the fee. Instead, you will receive stock in the company personally in exchange for incurring this expense. And of course, that means, so essentially you paid a startup expense, right? You paid for the corporation to be the entity to be incorporated, the entity to sponsor a 401k plan. So you're paying for these startup expenses out of your personal funds. So you, of course, you want to coordinate with your business tax advisor to let the business tax advisor know that you incurred these startup costs, so the tax advisor, he or she, can report those amounts as a business expense on the C corporation's tax return. Going forward, once the business is set up and funded, all the income and expenses needs to flow through that ROBS C corporation. So the C Corp is going to need to file a C corporation tax return, for example, the 1120 at the federal level. If you are being paid compensation for the work that you're doing in the company, that would have to be paid to you as W-2 wages. To the extent that any profits are distributed to the stockholders, keep in mind that you hold a significant amount of stock in the company through the 401k. So let's say you own 90% of the company through the 401k and 10% in your own name. If the company, once it's generating income, it's paying taxes, it has after-tax profits, if it wants to distribute those profits as dividends to the stockholders, well, this is common stock that's held in the company. So that means the stockholders have equal rights to the profits. So 90% of any distributed profits would have to flow back into your 401k account as a dividend with respect to the stock that's in the 401k, and would grow on a tax-deferred basis. And then the other 10%, like in our simple example, would flow to you personally as a dividend on the stock that you own personally. And then you'd have to work with your personal tax advisor to report that as a capital gain. So again, the C corporation is an active business. It's not just a shell company. Everything needs to flow through that C corporation. The C corporation can have subsidiaries, but even those subsidiaries would have to be, they would have to be owned by the C corporation. So that means that ultimately those income and expenses would be consolidated up to that C corporation tax return. So again, if you're on the Zoom, please don't hesitate to chat over questions. We'll go through those questions at the end. And if you're on the other platforms like LinkedIn or YouTube, please join at mysolo401k.net/my community. It's free to join. All are welcome. You can get direct access to the Zoom link and post questions 24/7 in the forums. So next issue to discuss with your CPA is, and to highlight, is that you must be a W-2 employee, right? You might have a CPA who's creative in other structures, maybe has other clients who have their own business that's not funded via ROBS, and that those other clients might be being paid by their businesses as a contractor for some good tax strategy or whatever the case may be. So those types of strategies are not going to be compatible with a ROBS 401k funded business. With a ROBS 401k funded business, you rolled over your money from your pre-existing retirement account, right? It could be in your former employer plan or your non-Roth IRA to your new employer plan. And then you invested the money into the stock of your new employer. That's why it's not a taxable distribution. So the prerequisite is that you're participating in that 401k plan. 401k plans are for employees. So in order for you to be eligible to participate in this new 401k plan, you need to be an employee of the business. So to the extent that the company is paying you compensation for the work that you perform, that would be paid as W-2 wages, not as a 1099 independent contractor. And of course, the compensation would have to be reasonable. So that's our next slide. Your compensation must be reasonable. So there's a couple of details and factors to consider there, right? Number one, you need to wait to receive compensation until the C corporation is generating income to justify that compensation. Again, it must be reported as W-2 wages, not as a 1099 contractor, for example. So you're going to have to coordinate with your tax advisor, right? So they can pay payroll tax, can track it, can ultimately report it as W-2. Of course, from the business's perspective, paying the compensation to employees is a business expense. So that's going to reduce the C corporation's taxable income. But then you would report that on your personal 1040, like any other W-2 that you might receive. And ultimately, the compensation needs to be reasonable. So no more than what the company would have to pay someone else to do all of the things that you do. Next, the fact that you funded your business via ROBS means that you are eligible. You might be able to start a business without having to incur debt, but that doesn't mean that the business can't incur debt, right? There's a large number of clients who use the ROBS to essentially qualify for an SBA loan. So it's effectively a down payment on the ROBS 401k money that's invested is effectively a down payment to obtain that SBA loan. So if the business does obtain a loan, the loan is made to the ROBS C corporation, right? It goes back to the foundational concepts, right? That this C corporation is the business, right? You're operating through this entity. So it's going to be a commercial loan in the name of the C corporation. You may personally guarantee the loan in your own capacity, say as the president of the company. You would not be able to sign anything, however, that indicates that the 401k, right, as a stockholder of the C corporation, is guaranteeing that loan. So we wouldn't be able to sign anything, for example, that says all the stockholders of the borrower, meaning the C corporation, guarantee the loan, because all the stockholders would include the 401k, right? Because the money that you invested from the 401k account, stock is issued to the 401k for your benefit. So technically, the 401k is the named stockholder holding it for your benefit. So thank you again for participating on the other platforms like LinkedIn and YouTube. Please join at mysolo401k.net/my community. Joining our community is free. You get access to our daily live Zoom links. We go live every day at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. So more issues to discuss with your CPA and to highlight. So your ROBS 401k funded business cannot do business with any other business that you own or a disqualified person owns. So again, we have folks who, you might have a creative CPA who wants to have you hold real estate that's used in the business in your own name for a certain tax strategy or tax advantage. So that's not going to be compatible with a ROBS funded business. So with a ROBS funded business, that entity cannot lease real estate from an entity that's, say, owned by you personally, or that's owned by a disqualified person, like a spouse or a parent or a child. So if the ROBS funded business could hold real estate in a separate entity, it would have to be a subsidiary of that ROBS funded business. So it could be, say, like 100% LLC subsidiary of the ROBS C corporation. Another simple example would be, if you are, very simple, but right, let's say that you have an existing milk farm, dairy farm, right? And you want to use the ROBS to start an ice cream business. You can't set up and fund this C corporation with your retirement money to start the ice cream business and then anticipate that C corporation is going to be buying all the milk to make the ice cream from your existing dairy farm. That would not be allowed. That would not be permitted. So that's just a very simple example to illustrate the concept here. No personal loans to the ROBS C corporation. So any money that you invest in the business, whether it's retirement money or non-retirement money, has to be structured as a stock purchase. You're not eligible to lend money personally to the C corporation. So that's another difference, right? You might have a tax advisor who, for other small business clients, has structured part of the investment as a loan, a personal loan to the business. Here, that's not an eligible structure. That's not compatible with the ROBS 401k funded business. If you're buying a business, where we see typically in the purchase of a business is an asset purchase, but sometimes clients want to use the ROBS to fund a new C corporation that's going to ultimately buy the stock of another business. And that's fine. I mean, subject to the fact, I mean, you can't buy a business from yourself, but let's say the stock is owned by an unrelated person and you otherwise meet the requirements like an active business, you have money that's eligible to be rolled over, et cetera. But let's say that that existing business that you want to buy, that target business, is taxed as an S corporation. Well, so if the goal is to buy the business as a stock purchase, right, you would effectively have a C corporation buying the stock of an S corporation. But under those S corporation rules, a ROBS C corporation can't own an S corporation. So that's just not really a ROBS rule, but just something to highlight if for your CPA or attorney, if you're looking to use a ROBS 401k to fund the stock purchase of a business. And it really flows from the fact that because you're funding the business via ROBS, you have to fund a C-Corp. And the S corporation rules, under those S corporation rules, again, a C-Corp can't own an S-Corp. So that type of structure would not be compatible with the ROBS. So thank you again. If you're on the other platforms, please join at mysolo401k.net/my-community. It's free to join. All are welcome. You get direct access to these Zoom links. Again, we go live every day at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Next issue to discuss with your CPA or attorney is that a ROBS 401k has a separate EIN, right? So the C corporation is going to have its own EIN, right? That would be used, for example, when filing the C corporation tax return. And the 401k is a separate legal entity. It's a trust, and it will have its own employer tax identification number. That's the regulatory expectation. That's the way that we've always done things. And we'll, of course, obtain that EIN as part of the establishment process. Next issue, the ROBS C corporation must maintain a 401k plan. So setting up a 401k plan is not just a one-time event. So ultimately, that 401k plan that's sponsored by your new C corporation business, the ROBS C corporation, is going to need to maintain that plan. So what is some of the details of that? So the plan needs to be offered to eligible employees. There'll be an annual informational tax return called a Form 5500 for the 401k. In order to determine the information that needs to be listed on that annual tax return, you'll need to know the value of the plan assets. So here, a large percentage or a large part of your 401k assets is going to be the stock in that ROBS C corporation. So in order to determine the value of that ROBS C corporation stock that's in the plan, you'll need a valuation of the ROBS C corporation. And we facilitate that valuation as part of our service. Even the cost is included as part of our annual fee going forward, as part of our annual compliance fee. Our annual fee doesn't start until 12 months later because primarily because most of the ongoing requirements don't kick in until the second year. But of course, there are a number of important requirements, such as these mentioned here, and you will absolutely need that valuation in order to file the Form 5500. Now, separately, the ROBS C corporation, again, it's an active business, so it's going to have its own tax filing, licensing, et cetera, depending on the exact nature of the business. So you would work with your own tax or legal advisor to handle those annual requirements for the ROBS C corporation. So thank you again. If you're on the other platforms like LinkedIn or YouTube, please join at mysolo401k.net/my-community. So that takes us to the end of the issues that we wanted to highlight. If there's any questions in the Zoom, please don't hesitate to chat them over. Otherwise, we'll just highlight that we'll be back here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow's session, we'll be talking about how to save up to $61,000 per year in a crypto Roth IRA. we'll be back on Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern with our open session going through frequently asked questions regarding self-directed solo 401ks and self-directed IRA LLCs. So it looks like that takes us to the end. Thank you again so much for the participation. And until next time, all the best.